Steve.
That was great, Dave. Thank you. The cities that were listed as being participants in this program, how did they become members of this? Did it require some legislation, or was there a kind of community activist group in the city that promoted it? How did that happen? So we can look for it and try to prevent it in our cities.
Yes, yes. It just requires the okay of the administration, the council, or the mayor, usually the city council of the affected city.
So it's an ordinance that's voted on, or is that?
They would have to approve a resolution, or if it involves funding, they have to approve an ordinance. If they're going to contribute funds, that's probably why some members, they noted that I volunteer in our local city government, some of you know, that's why I know this. That's why some of those communities are listed as contributing and others are not.
What is a political leader?
Probably left.
Or
Falling over left.
Excellent presentation. I just wanted to know if those slides are going to be up on the website, because I have a lot of people I want them to see.
I should have told you, and if you refer to the website, also, if you want to send me an email, I always offer wherever I go, I'll send this to you as an attachment, and you can use it wherever you want, and I hope you do. Okay? Yes, sir.
What happens if they don't get their funding at the end of 2013?
They'll probably get more. You know, it's HUD, DOD, and the TPA. It's this evil triumvirate. And I don't think Congress has the wherewithal, the nerve, the whatever it takes to stop the funding. So that funding is going to be dropped down to HUD. And I'm guessing if they are not successful in implementing it this year, they'll get more money. There's one thing, I learned something really interesting in digging on this. The consortium had to sign a contract with HUD to get this money. It's called a cooperative agreement. And in digging on this, I found out that there's a difference between cooperative and collaborative and coordinated. And in this document, HUD says that because this is a cooperative agreement, the federal government will have much to say about how this is implemented. The difference is that it says cooperative a number of times in this Form 1044, and if it said coordinated, it means that the governments come as equals. But when it says cooperative, it means that our local governments are subordinate. And they make it very clear in this agreement. Yes, sir?
Dave, nice job in a very short time. Very important issue. Like gun control, this is people control. And that's what it is. I read a book called Behind the Green Mask, Agenda 21.
Good book.
I recommend to really learn more about this. Dave did very well with the time he had. This will introduce you what is really going on here. I live in North Royalton. North Royalton is getting ready to have what they call the master plan meetings. This is where they infiltrate. And it's done without the knowledge of government or the citizens. If you don't know what's going on, you'll hear buzzwords like clean water, clean air. They say everything they want to hear, but that's not their agenda. People control is their agenda. And you're going to be introduced in the next, it's already being introduced here, it's called the, attaching to our houses now, the meter, the smart meter. Educate yourself about the smart meter, because that is part of Agenda 21, a big part of it. And also, Don talked a little bit about the Blaze. The Blaze has been on top of this for about 6-7 months. It's worthwhile. Check it out. Thank you.
Thank you. And I should add that there's a heck of a lot more to Agenda 21 than what we've covered. All right, I encourage you to do some research, do some searching. My website has a whole bunch of links to to websites that are actionable on that website. You can follow them, and you can learn a heck of a lot about the rest of Agenda 21. There's much more. Yes. Question?
I'm known as Grandma Marge on WHK Radio with Pastor Ernie Sanders. And I get as much of the information from this group and other groups out on the radio, at least through Pastor Sanders, so that he can alert the public. As far as that clear source water thing, I had a big argument with somebody who wanted to put a new meter in my house. I said, that is not necessary. I don't need a meter, and you know I don't need a meter. So I said, please, if there's any problem with this, you have your official members, the president or whoever, call me, and they did. And I said, get out of our area, we don't need you. And I said, but do tell me, why do you tell me it's not going to cost us any extra money. However, in our conversation, he said this all involves windmills all along Lake Erie. And the whole program would cost at a minimum $212 million. I said, take your windmills and go home. And I've never heard another word from him, but please, people, wake up. Don't let anybody in your house to put any kind of a meter. All the necessary meters we have are already there. So stand up for your personal privacy.
Amen. Those smart meters are hooked up to the national grid, which is then hooked up to the international grid. It is run by a UN organization in London, England. Okay.
Yes, David, thank you, and you spoke so well at Streetsboro recently with another man that came up from the Carolinas. What was his name?
John Casey from Alabama.
John Casey from Alabama. And we all spent 2 or 3 hours with him after Dave's presentation, listing all the other things that are involved in this agenda. Many of them food supplies that will be totally compromised. Animals having as much rights as anybody else. More. Bears have as much right to food as we do. And it goes on and on. It goes into a descent into hell, this agenda. And this Casey will also come up to any of our organizations. He's paying his own way to do this. And he's a marvelous speaker, and we really need to be informed, folks. Dave's only just touching on a slight bit of what's involved here. It's about our food supplies, it's about animal control, it's about every other possible thing that affects our daily lives. We need to get up and arm immediately.
The land banks in Cleveland are a good example, where houses are being demolished and they're creating green spaces and community gardens. Everybody has community gardens. And the whole idea is, in the long term, is to move folks back into those cities. And the community gardens are designed to provide food for them because they don't want to have the carbon footprint of all those trucks coming, bringing strawberries from West Coast. So you want to think about, you move us all into the city, how in the world are they going to grow enough food to provide for all of us in this little local community and surrounding gardens? It's not possible. Back here.
Hello, everybody. It's Patty. So Dave talked about the Delphi technique just a little bit. Before you go to any of these planning meetings, and please plan to go to these NEOSCC meetings, your local planning commissions, plan to go in groups, but don't go without researching this Delphi technique and how a facilitator uses it. So you can effectively disrupt the meeting. And I see Dave's talking with them a little bit. Anyway, if you want to disrupt this meeting or be heard without getting marginalized, the only way to do it is to be prepared. Dave, if you would talk a little bit about why you have to study this Delphi technique before you go to the meeting. It's like you almost don't want to go to the meeting to be marginalized unless you know this information. Could you just explain a little bit more why it's so important?
You've covered it pretty well. The way it works, Marcia and I went to a meeting a couple years ago, and it was to present the reasons why we needed a school levy increase in Medina. And we didn't know what the Delphi technique was then, and since then we've learned, okay? You go and there's a facilitator who lays out all the reasons why, and they ask for positive input from the participants, who, by the way, were invited to go. Then there's a discussion going back and forth. Marcia asked a really difficult question. They didn't like it, so they took a break. The break is that you go back to your table and you sit down and you talk with whomever you were with. We made the mistake of going with folks that we knew, so there was a group of us who had the same orientation again. And we were visited by a floater. Didn't know at the time, but every table that was there was visited by one of these folks, who then went back to the facilitator, and we were fundamentally shut out of the rest of the discussion. Okay, so what they do is identify troublemakers, and they try to marginalize you, they try to make you feel embarrassed, they try to make you sit down and shut up. And that's why recognizing when the Delphi technique is being used on you, you know how to confront it. You got to have a thick skin. You got to be able to stand up and say, BS, I don't agree with what you're saying. You got to do it. Once you've done it, it's not so hard. You just have to do it. What else? Oh, the next meeting of the school group had, we were invited.
They've been implementing this.
Right?
They implement this whole agenda bit by bit, piece by piece. You've been reading about it if you've been reading your papers.
Yeah.
Because it's going on every day, all day, implementing this program. The Metro Park buying another 460 acres.
Yep.
And the media applauds.
Huh?
And the media applauds. County Dealer and other media always present it as a big positive. They speak of it in the most positive term.
Oh, yeah.
Dave talked about collaboration. We have some attorneys in the room. You would call it collusion.
Yeah.
They're going to also charge us as taxpayers for digging ditches and rivers and wells and you name it, what they're going to do this 460 lakefront area. But we'll be responsible for Metro Parks,
And then-
doing all the implementation.
When you're in the sewer district, of course, if you've got a big roof or a big patio, you're going to pay a fee, aren't you? Yeah. Question, Becker?
I'm going to say we met the enemy and they are us. Following up on the gentleman from North Royalton, we have 2 issues of zoning on the ballot in May from Broadview Heights. And it is zoning issues. And I will bet you right now, there isn't 10 people in our city that know anything about what they're going to go in and vote on, including the councilman. And people are not attending their council meetings. I do. I've gone since 1964. Sometimes I was mayor, sometimes I was council, but I'm there regardless.
She was mayor of Broadview.
And I notice a big difference. If a crowd of people come in and the place is filled, even if you say nothing, the whole thing conducts different. I notice 2 now councilmen are going into committee meetings. Well, we're following them into committee meetings too, because on their council meeting, all they do is read the title and they all say yes. And you've learned nothing, and it seems boring. But I'm going to tell you, if you get into it, it's more exciting than anything on TV. But you've got to get in there and follow that.
I will add that if anyone has a need for another talk like this, that's what I do. Okay, I'm retired. Marcia will tell you it's a full-time job. I guess it is. But I'm headed to Columbus on Saturday. I've got an invite to go to Erie, PA, Cincinnati later on, so I'm available. I'll be glad to talk about this anywhere. Yes.
I have two questions. Something as innocent as bike paths, I understand is part of this agenda.
Yes.
And we just saw one coming down our street on Bennett Road in North Royalton. So I'm that alarmed seeing about where our city is going. The other is I heard, and I maybe, this upset me, but I had no way to research it, or I wasn't able to find anything, that, say, my widowed mother, who now lives in a 3-bedroom home that was our home, but it's only one person now, that eventually this, under this agenda, would not be allowed, because that's too much. This was on Glenn Beck the other day, where he said that, you know, people would be forced to share, that's too much space for one person. Have you heard anything like that at all? I haven't been able to find any information on that.
Not specifically, but it fits in with the agenda of moving people into more dense environment. I've never seen anything that says they're going to make somebody move into somebody's house. But I would say that, you know, the long term here is to get folks moved into high rises with lots of open space. Yes, sir.
The bike paths are to get us out of our cars.
Pardon me?
The bike paths are to get us out of our cars.
In Medina, we spent something like $400,000 and some thousand at a bike path not too long ago. And when I went to city council and talked to the guy who's in charge of it, he said, or I said, you had to say that that this was to reduce the carbon footprint and reduce traffic in downtown Medina. And we both know that's not going to happen. This is recreational. It's not to allow people to ride their bike into town and buy groceries. Okay, so it's just, the only thing to bear in mind is that all these communities are hooked on money. Okay, they need funds, at least they make a reason for obtaining funds. And it's going to be pretty tough, isn't it, to say, stop taking the money, because all that money has hooks, all that money has conditions, and that's what we're going to be fighting. Is the people who need the money, we're going to have to try and wean them away from it somehow. I'm not sure how.
You know, I was reading today some of the transcripts from the Nuremberg trials, and Hermann Goering, who was Hitler's chief of his Air Force, he said at the trial to all the judges after they sentenced him, he said, "You will take from us, you will learn from us, and you may improve upon it. And when you do that, you will capitalize on it. And when you implement it, you will be a far formidable terror to the world than we ever were." A friend of mine who's a professor of history in England said that he thinks the reason that we went to war to fight the Nazis is so we could all become them.
Also, merged cities, the new study that Fitzgerald we're paying for, taxpayer money, is two things: shared services, okay, and also merging cities.
Yes.
So you can bet when they come back with this study that you'll be merging cities like Solon with Warrensville Heights, the school, the whole thing, and we'll be able to vote on it. But if they put one good school district with 3 lower school districts, who's going to win that vote?
That's why we have to make our voices heard. The key again is your local government still have the power to say yes or no. And it's going to be up to people like us to put the right people in office at the local level and to get them to say no. It's going to be a challenge, but believe me, it is doable.
Excuse me.
People who haven't had a chance to speak yet.
This is a very small portion of it, in talking about what Barbara was talking about. With regard to the smart meters, they do not have an option. We do not have an option. The only option that we have, possibly if somebody steps in, if somebody's got a pacemaker problem or something else, they can do that. If you watch Glenn Beck, which you need to watch and forget about the paper, it will tell you about certain things that happen in Southern Ohio. Disabled women, etc., etc. I'm not going into that. But Texas, as free as Texas has been, they're really hammering Texas. There are people in Texas that have stood against the people that have come with the smart meters 7 or 8 times. True, they didn't do it. But there have been other people in Houston, which is where Glenn Beck is, that have had the smart meters put on their house. Smart meters interrupt a lot of it. Radio frequencies 24/7. I mean, I'm not even going to go into it. Go online and find out what it does. But the opt-out situation is this. The more people that try to opt out, the more they will come against you, and those will go on your house, and they will jack up the frequency, so you won't be able to stand the stuff in it. That's only a little part of it.
Did you know that all the new appliances are going to have chips in them that connect to the smart meter? And the theory is that they're going to, if you use a lot of energy at peak time, when they say it's not going to cost anymore, they're going to charge you more if you're using energy at that peak time. And all your appliances, your washer, your dryer, your stove, whatever, so you're going to have to do your wash at 1 in the morning, I guess. There's a question here somewhere.
Well, my question is, how on earth did this get so well organized to this stage of development? I'm very puzzled and troubled by it. But how on earth did this really happen outside of things like the lab? I know they've been going on 20 or 30 years. But I think we need to get Congress involved and say, hey, no. Because they have more power than we do. They need help.
That's right, it has to be part of the approach. Let me tell you something, folks. So the young man who was here tonight, Kevin, congressmen don't routinely send their state level director to little club meetings. And I like Dave Joyce. I think he's a good man. But he knows darn well he's going to need this group's support to get reelected. You have power as part of this organization, not me, you. You're part of 650 some, or I think it's almost 670 some people now. Dave Joyce, Congressman Bernanke, Senator Portman knows that it was the people from this group who pounded the pavements for them week after week, did flyers, sent letters, did postcards, put signs up on highways, etc. Made a difference. You can't reach out to Congress. We still control the House of Representatives. Tell these guys, get a backbone. And tell them, and I'm not telling you how to think, but tell them, you know what? I'm not going to work for you next time. And if I have to get a Democrat, I mean, my own personal opinion is, I'll take an enemy at some point whose actions at least I can anticipate and react to, than a so-called ally who I can't depend on. Because they're just wasting my time. Frankly, we have too many rhinos in Congress. Jenny asked how we got here. We got here because for a long time the Republican Party was complicit, went along, got along, was asleep at the switch. As long as many of them in the establishment were at the table, they didn't really care. You heard no less than Barbara Bush after the last election tell Republicans, get over it. That's exactly what she said. Life goes on, elections have consequences. She must have read it from Barack Obama's. So, I mean, folks, you decide for yourselves, but I'm telling you, you have a voice, you're still the ultimate power, and Congress can do something. if they get a backbone and they decide.
Don't you think we have to be involved? Don't you think we have to be involved with encouraging Congress with large numbers, insisting that this program not go forward? Because it's doomed.
It's
We're all doomed.
Every one of these programs is a line item, and if the House of Representatives decides not to put that line item in, they're not going to get the funds. I work as a volunteer planning commission member here in the city of Brecksville. I know how funding works for local communities on things like road work, parks, expansion of infrastructure, and grants that each of our communities get. I'm sometimes involved in those things. I know that they are a line item in the state legislature's budget. And if you go to your state legislature and say, we don't want that, or we do want that, they can't have an effect. It's a big challenge. I don't want you to think it's easy, but that's the challenge we face, and that's the option we have, the power of the purse.
I have just a quick thing to add, maybe two things. Some of us are attempting to make a difference. We're creating what I'm calling a coalition, and we're getting representatives of each of the 12 counties and putting them together. There are 2 or 3 of the coalition members in our audience tonight, but what we're attempting to do is to get a rep from each of the counties so that they can go around and do what I'm doing and be a little more effective than Ashtabula and Lorain County and Wayne County. One thing that I thought, this is just something I penned today, and I thought this is something I want to say at one of the meetings, and I'm just going to read it. You have proposed a new plan that would be implemented through new regulations, zoning and land use overlays. I say it's a new level of governance, a bureaucratic overlay, if you will. What you seem to suggest is our elected officials are incapable or incompetent to carry out these plans. If they are, we should replace them. If this plan is so great, then it should stand on its own. Pass it on to local elected officials to secure the approval of the majority of their constituents. Then you can dissolve this consortium. That's what I want to say to the meeting.
When will you be in here?
I haven't got a final date yet. Sometime in March, I'm told. Okay. I think it's going to be with the Erie County Township Association, from what I know. Yes, it's easy. It's davidfrost.org. Even I can remember that.
Excuse me, I think this information really needs to get into major media like Fox News, the talk show radio program, and the papers. There is no information on this that I've never heard.
Blaze TV.
Dave, one of the people that asked me to ask you, where does Governor Kasich stand on the issue, number one? And number two, is there a national champion in Congress, legislature, or an organization nationally, other than grassroots efforts, that we can get behind to help fight this?
There are some real experts out there, folks who have done a lot of writing on it. I don't know that there's a real cohesive group, and that's one of the problems, I think. I don't know that there's a champion in Congress either. Well, we could find one and pick on. We could pick on one. We were in a meeting. We were in a meeting with Jim about a month ago now. 3 weeks. Okay, that's almost a month. Anyhow, I asked him, what he knew about Agenda 21, and his answer was something like this. Well, at the time he was on the Financial Oversight Committee. Now I guess he's on the Budget Committee now. I think he's got to change. But his answer was, well, this is my focus. I am on the Budget Committee. My focus is finance. I know a little bit, but not too much about Executive 21. He's saying, well, I said, okay, what about this bill that's in another committee? He said, I really can't pay attention to other issues in the committee. It may never come out of committee. And he says, when it does come out of committee, I can look at it. But that's kind of my answer to getting a champion. You've got to find the person that's in the right committee, I think. It's probably no one from Ohio. There's a fellow, I think, from Utah, named Bishop, I think, who's in charge of one of the natural resources committees.
I think the head of the issues committee here. Tara, maybe the issues committee can do a little research on who would be the people in Congress. I'm talking to Tara.
Well, didn't Kevin say that Dave Joyce was on that committee?
Yes, you're right.
Well,
Yes, you're
that's
right.
associated with this.
Yeah.
Do you have a number for Kevin that I can talk to?
I have to.
Hi.
You got a pencil?
I just have two questions briefly, please, because I know everyone wants to talk. The first question is, when you say that you're going to move people to cities, can you be specific? I mean, how does that happen? Do you envision them actually coming and saying, when you get your little sheet from the government or this group, and they say, oh, you have until a month to move your family into East 49th Street? What, I mean,
I can answer that. You have another question?
yes, my other question is, you mentioned Westchester County in New York. That was the first thing that they've actually done. What exactly was the upshot, and what did they do specifically, and what are they now, what phase are they in now that are 2017?
Okay.
Model for what they started?
That one's easy first. They make Westchester County, there's some kind of a development, I think something like 300,000 units. It might have been 30,000. I'm not sure about the zeros. And what they required them to do was to commit that they would import minority folks, basically African American and Hispanics, to bring that percentage up to the level that HUD said it needed to be. And it had to be an X% of that 30,000. And by the way, HUD fined them something like $700,000.
So in all the cities and communities in the county, they have to each take a certain amount of people and find housing for them? What does that mean? Do they have to find housing for them?
If HUD is successful in implementing what they have in rulemaker procedure scheduled for April, they will begin to try and roll out the forcing of immigration at the census tract level. I have a copy of it.
Are they going to get these people from the New York City boroughs, and where do they come from?
Well, yes, from the surrounding, at least in Westchester. Yes.
Poor parts of the boroughs.
Yeah.
So they just get off scot-free. New York City, or wherever they're coming from, they get something in return, or whether they get...
They'll stop taking care of their roads.
They already do.
They'll get them in, they'll stop taking care of their roads. They'll get them.
Yeah. There's one thing, she also asked how we're going to move people into the high rises. It's a long-term plan. One of the slides that you did not see tonight is something called the transect. Biologists and others use the transect as a way of analyzing terrain, the ecology, and it's basically broken up into 6 different sections, starting with the lowlands and ending up in mountainous territory, okay? It's divided. These folks have sort of hijacked that idea, and some planners have called it the transect, and they have at the left end of their chart, it's a graphic. It says rural, and then a little less rural, and then a little less rural, and it goes all the way over to high rise, okay? The plan they have is that every 20 years, and here's your answer, every 20 years, they're going to force whoever lives in that least populated area to move up into the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So after about 80 years, this is a long-term plan, they'll have all those folks moved into high rise. Believe it or not, that's really their plan.
Wow. Because that's how they live in Europe now.
Yes.
A couple of observations and comments. In a lot of the work I do, I bump into, rub shoulders with, and furiously email with a lot of these Bolsheviks that are involved in some of this stuff. And I've had lengthy emails with David Beach, who you know from Sustainable or Green City Blue Lake. I mean, he really believes in his heart of hearts that we should all live in 40 dwelling units per acre. That's his personal goal. And I've always wondered in my own mind, what's the prize? If the socialists are successful in achieving the so-called equality and getting everybody in these urban enclaves, what's the prize for that? Well, if you look at what the kind of the trends that we're seeing right now in the country, just recently we saw the survey of most miserable cities. It just comes out from Forbes magazine. A few years ago, there were 11 most miserable cities, all in the Great Lakes, all Rust Belt cities, all run for the last 40 years by Democrats. And so you can tell there's a kind of a trend there that they're pretty incompetent in terms of what their really achievement is in terms of measuring and producing quality urban environments for people. And yet nearby, there are suburbs run by Republicans like Bricksville that have endured prosperity over the same period of time. And so it isn't just the whole reasons in poverty, it's just the way people approach lifestyle and governance and things like that that make a big difference. So that's kind of a clue of what's really happening. Now if you look at the social demographic distribution now, like the wealthiest counties in the country, 7 of them now are centered around Washington, D.C. And most what used to be wealthy counties, like somewhere in Ohio and in New York and other areas, they've fallen off the map, and all of this wealth has now been aggregated into D.C. So the prize is, for all this so-called equality, is wealth and money and power for the ruling class, which is really what they're after here. And if you look at how the communist parties and some of these other socialist governments live, the party apparatchiks, the loyal party followers and leaders, live very well. They have villas and chauffeurs and all that kind of stuff, while everybody else has endured misery. And that's really the roadmap that I see this country on. And as we had last night, there was this Democracy Day thing. There was this war on corporations, which is a subtle form of this whole intrusion because it's a war on capitalism. And I write back a lot of emails and I get these things, oh, we got to move people into the cities and clean air and all this stuff. And a lot of this is the issue of what I will call self-inflicted poverty. Our demographic profile, if you will, how we live now, our center cities, our transit systems, our buses, our cars, our suburbs, and our outer areas are a function of our market forces. We have earned money, made choices, and chosen to live in certain areas and worked to achieve that through our education, our hard work. In fact, we keep jobs, we're still married to the women we married in the first place, raised our children, those kinds of things. Or we even know that our children even know who their fathers are. Where there are lots of places in the country where they don't have that. And so you see these big urban clusters, and it tends to create all this poverty. Well, it's a form of covetousness now. They taking no responsibility for their actions, and then they're asking to transfer wealth from people that have lived in the system, worked the system, knows that the system makes them prosperous, which is what our model is really about, and wants to confiscate that prosperity for themselves. But the resultant effect of that is shared misery for everyone in a ruling class that will have all this elite power. It's a very daunting process because it holds out this hope. Like, remember those videos from Obama phones? You know, I'm going to vote for him because he gave me an Obama phone. I'm going to get me some Obama money. You know, with no regard to where that money comes from or what they did to earn it or any of that kind of stuff. It's just kind of crazy. So, but I write back a lot of emails, and if you get emails about these things and stuff, I always have arguments with people about where's the market forces in your plan. You know, why don't you just let the market forces settle where people live and how what kind of decisions to make, because that's how our country really grew and evolved. And most of these bureaucrats don't know what that means. They don't know what market forces are. They don't know how market forces shape themselves. And I bet most of you have had careers or are heavily exposed to the private sector. You know what it means to sweat a payroll and try to chase down receivables and sell something that people want to buy and stuff like that. And most of these bureaucrats have no clue. And I will say one other thing, though. There is a couple of quick things. Cleveland used to be 900,000 people, and it has been run by liberal Democrats for a long period of time, and now it is prospered and grown to 350,000 people, which has caused all these vacant housings and stuff like that. And they are trying to figure out, well, what do you do if you have housing for 1 million people and you got 350,000 to live in, and they ended up having to get rid of it. And so they have been steadily like de-densifying the city and making it a little nicer place to live, less ghetto-like. But they're trying to then repopulate this thing and force people back into the city when the market forces said, no, we kind of like it with 350,000. We'd rather not move back into the city. The people that left the city, that moved into Warrensville or out here in Rexville and stuff like that, they don't interested in moving back. They like a certain level of density. So anyway, the city of Cleveland participated in the Sustainable Cities, Sustainable Communities grant they got. And this is a terrific grant. It was, I think, 11 different federal agencies were going to bring experts to the city of Cleveland and assign them to help the city for a couple of years. And they were all going to work together. Now this is like Corps of Engineers, EPA, HUD, Department of Transportation, Department of Agriculture, a bunch of other agencies. And they were going to help support the Sustainable Cities model for the Cleveland. Well, after 2 years, they're coming up, and I think, well, they had to renew it. They fumbled around for the better part of 2 years and couldn't even come up with a decent mission statement among these bureaucrats. We've been exposed to it in an organization a little bit, and it's just pathetic. And the city is truthfully, hope for the future. They're so disgusted with the ineptness of these federal bureaucrats that they can't write a vision statement, they can't figure out what to do next, they don't know when they have a meeting, it's just pathetic. And so I mean, the fear of being run by bureaucrats is a real one, and you should be afraid. But the other thing is that never interrupt the enemy when they're making a mistake, because the bureaucrats couldn't invade the office across the hall with steel pencils, as far as I'm concerned. So there is hope for the picture. The argument on this thing is to constantly press what's the role of personal responsibility. When bureaucrats get in charge of stuff, they have no negative effect on their personal lives and poor outcomes. You know, all these politicians that have ruined a lot of these cities have all got pensions and live pretty well, but the cities are destitute and devastated. And so there has to be some mechanism that forces personal responsibility on how people conduct themselves. So, Dave, that was terrific, though.
Jim, that was terrific.
If you find time to write that down
on a piece of paper for the rest of us, we really love it.
I just have one more before. Can I go? I just wanted to answer your question. Is how are they going to get everybody into the cities? It's pretty straightforward. It's through backdoor legislation, such as this, treaties that go to the United Nations that get signed, that make that the supreme law over our laws. They'll jack the price of gas up to the point to where how you travel is going to be impacted. And so you'll naturally want to gravitate that way. They'll take the tax dollars, like they do today, away from all your communities. They take it to Washington, and then they determine where those tax dollars get spent. They're the ones who are going to say, here's where we're going to put this money, here's where we're going to put this money. And in the meantime, your suburbs start to deteriorate. And so people will gravitate to those cities. That's not representation. That's just what you were just talking about, rulers. And that's what they want to do.
So my advice is, get your tin hat on. And go to those meetings and forget you got to know it. Just go, okay?
Okay, just a couple real quick points. Did anybody listen to Trevisano this evening? I had him on in the car just for a little bit, a few minutes before 6, and I didn't hear the tail end of it, but he was asking, like, apparently, Continental or United, I guess, is somebody starting nonstop service between Cleveland and Portland, Oregon. And he was asking, like, why, you know, to a little trick actually, like, why does anybody need to be going back and forth from Cleveland nonstop to Portland, Oregon? But you're saying that's kind of a hub for all of this stuff, right? Portland, so that might make sense with the consultants coming back and forth, so who knows what impact that is.
They want them to get to the mothership.
Exactly. So that's one little thing. And then the other thing, Daniel, was a fabulous presentation, and I really know very little about this. I really can be eager easier to do some more research. The big challenge that I think we're all going to have, and everybody brought up a lot of really good points, comes back again to the messaging and the communication. One of our East Side friends that came last time she wasn't able to come tonight, Julie Love, some of you may have met her. Julie Love always says, you know, how difficult it is, the challenges that we have countering liberals and liberal ideology and so forth, because they love puppies. That's her tagline. We love puppies. So here is the same thing a couple of you said. We're for bike paths and gardens. And, you know, we don't want pollution and all this stuff. So I think that's really going to be a challenge. And obviously we need to dig in and understand more about all these commissions and all this stuff. But, you know, the way things are going to be portrayed, and especially in our world today of low information voters, that's going to really be a challenge. If the first who's the gentleman from North Royalton talking about the bike paths or whatever, if that's the first infiltration, you know, that's going to be very, very difficult to counter. And so I think we're going to need to be really on our game as far as communicating and having people understand that no, the bike paths are not necessarily a good thing down the road. The gardens are not necessarily a good thing down the road. If you're taking away choice, you're taking away people's representative government and so forth, so, and property rights. So we're really going to need to be in our game and figuring out the messaging for that.
Dave, first of all, thank you for your presentation. A lot of excellent information. And by the way, if anybody hasn't read this on the screen, please do. I was introduced to that in 1949 at a General Electric meeting, but it didn't have the gentleman's name on the bottom. And we were asked what our opinion was. And there were about 40 people in the class. They had at least 80 different ideas. That is an impossible statement that's out there if you really read that. Other than that, to make it a very short presentation, it's called Redistribution of Wealth. That is what Obama is about, and as long as he's there, there will be funding for these programs. So, friends and neighbors that voted for him, I won't even say shame on you. I have better words than that, so I won't say it. And again, thank you for the few moments here.
They're bribing us with our own money, restore federalism.
Speaking of bike paths, I was traveling in the last few days, I don't know, I think it was in Brexville, maybe Highland Road, and right in my lane was the bike, in the lane for the car. So it's not even a separate lane, I mean, it's a bike lane. Yeah.
It's called the Cheryl. They're
taking over.
They're making, that's what they did on Euclid. That's what they did on Euclid Avenue going all the way out. Okay, you have one side all the way down Euclid. I ride a bike some. The only problem with those bike riders is when they clean the streets, they don't clean the bike path. It's nice, but if you use the bike path when it's full of glass, it's like you're driving the street anyway, and you mess everything up.
Dave Christak, some of you have heard me speak before. A couple of things. Number one, I'd like to address what happened last night, which I believe is part of this entire process. And I would like to make a motion that this group start a petition to repeal issue, what was it, 25? That we start a petition.
We don't, unfortunately, we don't do local city issues, but why don't you, but we can talk about that real briefly, Dave, in the context of what's going on regionally.
Okay.
If you just would explain that. In fact, the mayor asked me to briefly thank all the Brexville residents who went to that last night. Tell them, because we're getting close to 9, and several other people want to speak, and we could talk about this thing all night. Explain to the audience real quickly what's just going on in Brexville, why it matters to them, because it is going to, because this is a trial balloon, and what happened.
Well, this is the result of a national campaign to attack the First Amendment.
The move to amend.
Move to amend is the name of it. There's a website, you can look it up. Basically, they're going after corporations, and they want to make a constitutional amendment that would limit or take away the right of any corporation to get involved in politics, basically.
That they want to overturn the Citizens United case where the Supreme Court said corporations are people and thus can spend money on political campaigns.
Right, but it's a lot more than that, because what are you going to do with radio? Radio's a corporation, all right? Well, maybe they won't be able to use Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck because they're funding or allowing that speech to come through a corporation. So this is really insidious and needs to be stopped. And they ignore the unions. Oh, right, and unions are exempt, of course. Of course. Now, that wasn't really what I wanted to talk about. I've been involved in the energy issue, as a number of you know. And I'm involved with some groups that are attacking the core of what this is, which is the carbon footprint. This is all based on reducing carbon. And that is because of the supposed relationship between CO2 and world climate, which is completely false. I have written some peer-reviewed papers. They are going to be published on some websites. And we are going after the core, which is the theory that drives this. There's a group of us, we're technical people, we're engineers. The papers will be published. I'm sure we'll be criticized. One of my friends is very involved in committees, and he is trying to get a ASTM committee going on reviewing this thing and taking it away from the politicians. If anybody wants, I can update you on some of this that's going on, but we see that we have to attack the core. Everything else is a side issue. And what needs to be done, in 2007, I believe, the Supreme Court ruled that CO2 was a pollutant. And if you can't reverse that, you have no legal basis for changing the policies. We need to get some legislation that reverses that so that the Supreme Court can say CO2 is not a pollutant. It's a plant food, it's a natural substance, and there's no relationship to global warming. So that's what I'm up to, and that's what we need to do.
Dave, I have a question for you. When you have people go to these city council meetings, do any of the city councils say, well, we're going to go into executive session and skirt the issue that way?
They can't. I think the only way that John, you probably know is
that
they have to do it whether they're doing a personnel issue or
Real
property. They can't go into executive session. Even when they do go into executive session, they have to declare why they're doing it. And it fundamentally is personnel, hiring, firing, raises, whatever.
They repeat what you told about the issue, how they go into the executive session. You didn't have a mark.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It's personnel issues or property acquisition.
And that's state law.
Yeah.
But there are ways around it too.
Well, probably. Although
If they want to break the law.
it's illegal. When I whispered to Domwood, and I got some advice for you. If you want to become wealthy under Agenda 21, buy a bike shop.
On March 25th this year was the Medina County Republican Party Lincoln Day dinner at Williams on the Lake on Lafayette Road in Medina. Governor Kasich is the keynote speaker. Any of you who want to go to that, probably be a good idea to go there and ask Governor Kasich in person what he thinks of Agenda 21.
Somebody asked me, sorry, I didn't answer that, where Kasich is on this. I think he's on board with most of it. I think he's in favor of regionalism. There are some websites on the state of Ohio government website called Smart Growth. I'm pretty sure they're in it. I've heard that Mary Taylor is in favor of it. I'm sorry.
Immediately
see after the Medina County Lincoln Day last year, Mary Taylor was a speaker. And they have the thing before where you can meet her and pay a bunch of bucks. But the other one paid $55. She gave her speech, thank you very much, and she left. There was no chance to talk to her, and in that case, it does the same thing. He's not going to want to hear from us.
Just going back to your sunshine law, there's the three things. If they name something, they go back, and they do discuss. How do we know what they're discussing back there? How do we know what they're deciding? They tell one another, you cannot go out and talk about what we said, although I've been told that isn't true. They could name the subject they're talking about, but they won't. And so we really don't know what's going on back there. They say impending lawsuit. Okay, they went back, no lawsuit ever came, nothing ever came out of it. What are they talking about? So you are allowed to go back for lawsuits, purchase of property or sale of property, and personnel, but not all personnel, just certain personnel type discussions. And they use that in order not to discuss out on the floor. And even if you do find out what they talked about back there, it doesn't go along with the sunshine law. But what do you do about it? I mean, really, what do you do about it? So it's a difficult situation. It's a good law if they would just follow it.
There's another aspect of meetings you should know about. It's called the open meeting law, and it's state law, that if the people who are running the meeting decide, they can say you can come here and listen, but you're not allowed to speak. So don't be surprised if you go to a meeting and ask to speak and they don't allow it. They should, but they are legally allowed to say, come listen, but don't speak. I think we've run out of time. Have we done?
Yeah, it's almost 9. Is there anyone else who has a question of Dave or a comment? Anybody who has a, Kathy, did you have a chance already?
Yes, I did.
Okay, well, so then that's fine, but before we go to Kathy, is there anybody who didn't have a chance and wants to ask a question or has a comment? Wait, get this gentleman right here. Jacob.
Thank you. Hi, I just want to say a word in favor of the gardens. I don't favor the collective idea this is going to save the city because we're going to grow our own food here. My wife told me she was in a grocery store, she saw a young black couple paying with food stamps for all processed foods. Probably because these kids were young, they didn't have a good upbringing. Nobody told them how to cultivate food. I mean, nobody had that kind of upbringing that we had. And we're only like 1 or 2 generations between civilization and barbarity. So I say, if there's a vacant lot and they want to grow food, they're going to learn how to do something good. They're going to see a good result. And I think that's a good thing.
Totally agree. I think I said that there's a lot of things in this program that are beneficial and positive. I think that's one of them.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you click back to the map where they have all the regions named, I believe a synonym of those regions is a Soviet. Is that not true? That is true. So we're looking at a highly organized force whose ultimate goal is for us to be organized into Soviets. Regions synonymous with a Soviet, according to how they're governed by non-elected officials. So I just want to leave you with that idea. It's a fact. I didn't make it up. Thank you.
Anybody else on this topic? Joe?
Joe Sherry.
Hey, Steve-O, while he's talking, I'm sorry, you're not interrupting, but can you put back up on the screen? Are there any people here from Southern County? Maybe you can rotate it. The 2 slides that show the public hearing dates and information. We'll put this on the website too, so you folks have a chance to. Go ahead, Joe.
I heard a lot of people talk about going to your congressman for help, or your politicians. Do you people have a short memory? You're going to go to the same Congress who we told no on bailouts, and we got it anyway? You want to go to the same Congress who we told no on Obamacare, and we got it anyway? Same Congress who told end the war, they said no, we still got it. The only people who's going to help is going to be you. To give you some bad news, but there's a thing we have, they call initiative. It's not a referendum, it's an initiative where you get a petition and you say you want to do this or that. And let's just say that all these people decided we're going to have an initiative that says no Agenda 21. You get your 400,000 signatures in Ohio, you advertise, you spend who knows how much money, and you get it passed and everybody agrees. And guess what? There's a little one-liner in Ohio revised code that says your